for us as a nonprofit, that is incredibly powerful to think that we can actually grow our work without having to grow our workforce. Welcome to the AI for Good podcast. I'm your host, Sam Wheatley, along with my co-host, Dylan Bose. We're here today talking about how AI is changing work. Obviously, there's questions about it. Will I lose my job? What's going to happen? How will this change the way that I do my everyday work? And so we're looking at that question from the perspective of having used AI pretty extensively over the last 2 years and how we see our own work changing and evolving over that time frame. So Dylan, thoughts about how work is changing with AI?
Yeah, I mean, short answer is quite a lot. But
how has it changed for you? How has it changed for you?
I mean, I use it every day. I honestly use it every day. It's hard to remember or imagine life without it now. But I think what inspired us to talk about this is we caught the NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said something like this following phrase was like, your job will not be replaced by AI, but your job may be replaced by another person who is using AI, which is a little bit too cute, of a little too clever by half sort of thing. But I think he's probably right. Like, it's not going to be some robot that's like doing your job with, sitting at a desk next to you or something. But it's like people who have figured out how to increase their own productivity using these tools will just be more valuable than people who haven't. So if that is the case, or if it's even partially the case, like the question that I'm asking myself is like, okay, how do I then prepare myself for that kind of future? And so that's something that we've been kind of talking and thinking a lot about. And there are a few different answers to that question, but obviously the first one is like, okay, I got to figure out how to use these tools.
Yeah. I mean, I think that quote is also resting on the idea that the person using AI is just much more productive than the person not using AI. So what are some illustrations we've seen of that increase in production? For me, I as well use AI in multiple AI products during the course of my day. And more, they're even built into just normal platforms and things you're using already. In fact, all of us have been using AI for a long time. We just didn't call it AI. We didn't know that's what it was. It was kind of operating in the background. Now that it's out front, it gives us the ability to customize and use AI for things that we do repetitively that we can automate. It gives us the ability to have access to fields of information that might have been pertinent to only a sort of specialist that we might not have known how to access that information. We can now create expert bots that can give us advice. Again, it's not replacing a lawyer. It's not replacing a marketing expert. It's not replacing those people, but it is giving us immediate access to all kinds of new ways to think about things. It also is helping us iterate super quickly on ideas. Right. So the idea to actually product in our nonprofit is almost minimal. Like we can prototype an idea very quickly and then create bots to test it and see how well we think it's going to run with our audience. And that's basically what we've been doing with our marketing is idea to something out the door is it's negligible. The idea generation of the product is almost the same thing.
And it's something that we've talked about a lot before is you can play around with ideas. You can, like you said, you can experiment, and the cost of doing the experiment goes way down because of the time spent is 5 minutes and not 5 hours, or it doesn't take meetings after meetings to get everybody aligned on just this like random experimental idea I have. I can sort of play it out using some of these different tools, and then come to everybody and say, I can sort of see down the road here, like, what do you guys think of this? And so that productivity,
and even putting into that process the clear points of view of other people and maybe your stakeholders that are out there that you need to make sure you think about how they're going to respond, so you can build that into the process too, so that your final product is already taken in some of the threat assessments or the stakeholder proclivities that they want to include, and you're able to answer those questions in the final product instead of, again, this back and forth maybe with multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, totally. And then what I love too that we've sort of done with some of this is like, once you do that process a few times, you can then systematize and, like download that knowledge of that whole process. And now it's like part of what the process of like coming up with ideas is like, okay, I now know it's going to be really helpful if I put this through these different bots that are representing different parts, different stakeholders in our nonprofit.
Exactly. I mean, the other thing is, I forget who posited this last year or so, was saying they're waiting for the arrival of the first one-person billion-dollar company. And AI actually empowers that kind of thinking that we see, that a small team is able to do so much more because of these tools than they were able to do previously. Even just 3 years ago, 1 year ago, what we're able to do is a dramatic increase.
Yeah, we had an example of that at our nonprofit, without going into too many details, but there was a question about like hiring this specific person for this specific role, and what should we look for, X, Y, and Z. And then, as we were sort of talking about it, we kind of kept, we don't know where it's going to go from here, but we kind of kept saying, gosh, even with our small team, I feel like we could knock this role out, honestly, with the tools that we have. So even though, we'll see what actually happens with that specific position, but just the fact that it was, I mean, how often, I just feel like that is a revolutionary perspective now, where
absolutely
the complaint was always like, why won't my company hire people to fill this role? Cause I'm drowning here, that's what people usually complain about. But this was like, oh, no, I think we maybe could handle that. Which is just kind of funny to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And then also just that, you can, again, going back to the idea that you're not going to be replaced by AI, but by people who use AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, I mean, in a normal circumstance, we would have had to spend money to hire extra people to do the level of output that we're now operating at.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ideas there. One is that it does make your team actually have more bandwidth.
Yeah.
Because it frees up from the workflow a lot of the sort of grunt work and the repetitive work that can easily be automated now, or turned into a little automation, or offloaded to a specialty bot to do, who doesn't mind repetitive tasks and doing this over and over again. And so it allows your team, to be more creative, to use that bandwidth for ideation and thinking and imagining. But it is replacing people that you might have hired previously. And for us as a nonprofit, that is incredibly powerful, to think that we can actually grow our work without having to grow our workforce.
Yeah, exactly. And so that is sort of that principle that Jensen Huang mentioned,
Yeah.
in action, because that is a role that somebody then maybe isn't on a job board, because we're now able to handle it. And like, one of the other things that I was thinking about is it's just going to be in the same way that it wouldn't even, if you're in some kind of digital trade, it wouldn't make sense to be like, oh no, I don't actually use email. Like, you're going to use email.
I wish I didn't have to use email.
Totally. I know, exactly. So maybe in the future we'll go back to the past where we didn't have to be swimming in emails all day, but because it'll be automated. But it's like it's those tools just become part of the vernacular. And I think that's kind of what he's saying. It's like,
yeah,
you're not going to be, it's not going to be an option really to not be using, at least in some version of them.
Yeah. And again, whether you know it or not, it's in operation. It is, we use the term AI or machine learning, but it's really just technology. And so like what you're saying is like, this is a technological shift. And so somebody that's a holdout in the 80s from using a personal computer, I'm going to stick to my mail, and, everybody is forced to adapt eventually to be part of this social contract unless you opt out. And so this is kind of the Amish option. You could opt out, but there's really no where this is going but increasing integration into everybody's lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for me, my experience, because honestly, I will just get real here, but like I was doing the Amish option with social media, and like in a lot of ways I still kind of do. And I just was like, I refuse to do this. And it was really, when it came time to look for a job, like a job job, it was really tough, because every recommendation that my friends who were like in tech would give me was like, you just got to network on LinkedIn. I'm like, I'm not on LinkedIn, so it was, like we're saying, you're opting out of maybe more than you think, is kind of what I'm saying there. And so that was a major challenge. However, my experience with AI has not been toxic in the way that I think social media is, but it's more like, more feels like fun and creativity and adventure and things like that. So I know there are people out there who are listening to us who are like, maybe feel the way I felt about the demands of the digital economy, and being like, you have to be on social media, like what, but I just, my advice is it's not really the same kind of culture and experience there. So I think you'll have much more fun playing around with AI than.
Yeah, totally agree, Dylan. And, as somebody in their 50s coming to this new technology, I'm Gen X. I've been through every major technological quote unquote advance out there. Looking at my childhood is pretty much an Amish existence, except for TV. But
it's awesome.
Compared to now, it is. And there are a lot of advantages to that. But I think what's encouraging about this evolution of technology is it's so much more accessible. Previous eras,
exactly,
there was a lot of arcane and sort of insider baseball language that you needed to learn in order to use the tools. So like to truly web design, back in the day, you had to learn to code. Now you can create websites without knowing how to code at all. Or you can tell your AI assistants, hey, I'm thinking about this. How do I get from here to there? And it actually guides you step by step. So I just also want to shout out to maybe older folks. I'm one of those now, who are suspicious and think, no, I'm just going to stick with my Facebook. technology. That's as high as I want to go. There is actually, like Dylan's been saying, there's this sort of fun element to this that was there when I remember first getting email. Like, I can immediately talk to my friends, and there's that sort of excitement again.
I totally agree with that, Sam. I think it's such a good point to reiterate often, which is that the bar for entry is actually incredibly low with this.
Yeah, very low.
It seems like it would not be, but it really is. And that is what's sort of revolutionary about the natural language processing thing, which is like you can talk to it in natural language. So that's how you can get it to do really powerful things. And the way it understands kind of what you're asking for is amazing. And yeah, it's almost like we are being freed from the tyranny of software, and all that stuff. And I think that gets a lot of people nervous too, because like the tech industry has had such dominance over our culture in so many ways. And I don't think that's going to last. It's going to be different, it's going to be different. And now the door is open for any kind of normal person like you or me to be able to use these tools in a revolutionary way in our own work, in our own personal life, and come up with cool ideas. Like I'm monologizing a little bit here, but like I feel like I always have interesting ideas, and I would always be like trying to text my friends who are actual programmers. So I'm talking like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I'd text my friends who are programmers. And I'd be like, let's do this, and they're like, that's way too hard, and it's going to cost way too much money. I'm like, I want to build an app that does this, and and they're like, no, I don't have time. I have a job. Yeah. But now I can come up with an idea and explore it on my own. I don't need a programmer to sign off on it, or to find somebody to pay them to create something. Like there are these no code, they're called no code apps, where you can use natural language and tell it to build this thing for you, and it will just do it. It's so crazy.
Yeah, no, this going back to the evolution of work, somebody previously, back in the day, 3 years ago, might have had to build an app and it to be lucrative and adopted by a lot of people in order to make money. Like you're saying, the costs have come so far down. We have that's basically what these automations are tiny little apps that we create to do specific work pieces that we don't want to have to repetitively do over and over and over again. And so there are applications that are now being tailored to your specific workflow. And that is revolutionary. Like, hey, I don't like doing this. Oh, let me just build an app or an automation to do that for me.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It's like, imagine if you could. Have you seen the movie Multiplicity? One of my favorite movies from the 90s is called Multiplicity, and it's like this overworked dad, and can't keep track of his family and his job, and he finds this scientist who's going to clone him, right? And so he clones himself, and he makes there's 3 or 4 clones of him, and it's hilarious. But that's kind of like what you can do with AI. That's like, I can do my job, my marketing job. I can sort of experiment with, well, what if I wasn't just a marketer? What if I could program an app as well, and then use my marketing expertise to come up with something that's helpful for customers? So you can do the work of 3 or 4 people with just one person.
And this gets into the side hustle ideas. Like you can, AI gives you the ability to have a lucrative side hustle without it dominating all of your spare time. Like you could, within 6 to 8 hours a week, take something that you know how to do, create some automations, create some, access points for people to pay you for that expertise. It's
Yep.
really very attainable in a way that 3 or 5 years ago it was harder to do.
Kind of wasn't. Well, I mean, we can talk about this podcast a little bit, we've created a system for our podcast where we come in and we record it, but we have a lot of automations and sort of streamlined AI systems on the back end that get it out the door into, post it online and get it into different places much faster. And then even like specific things, like when we have a guest, we've created a Notion form that we can send to the guest where they just type in their little bio, their links, and it's like synced up with our automation that puts it into the description of the episode. And it's like, if you can think about saving just 30 minutes here, an hour here of back and forth and that kind of thing, that really adds up over time, because there's those little things that keep you out of the flow, when in your daily work. It's more than just the time spent. It's the little, if you're spending 5 minutes on this task, it takes you 15 minutes to get back into the flow of your like deeper work,
right.
So it's more, it's like you end up saving more than just the 5 minutes. It's actually 20 minutes so that you don't have to go in and out of your deeper work, Yeah.
And this podcast, basically the work for it is enjoyable for Dylan and I to have this conversation. These are conversations we were kind of having just on the fly. We're like, hey, I bet other people would be interested in this or be interested in joining this conversation. Let's just start a podcast. And then we started slowly figuring out all these automations where it's like, basically the work of the podcast is the enjoyment of the podcast, of just making it, which transforms the experience. And it, we didn't have to hire audio engineer. We don't have to do all these sort of things that 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have been a much bigger project, and also keeps people's voices out of the conversation. Whereas now we're able to easily access and sort of step into the public square, stand up on our little soapbox and talk about a topic that we care about, and slowly build an audience, which has been great.
Yeah. And so I think, in summary, like the point that we're trying to drive home here is like, we recommend you start with this now, because that way you can implement AI technology in your own work to prepare for the future, but also makes your life a little bit easier. And, if the future is uncertain and just in terms of the economics of all this stuff, it's going to be helpful to know how to use these tools, but there is a low bar to entry. So it doesn't require that much investment to experiment with it. And if you're listening to this podcast and like by the end of this episode, like you're probably on board with that anyway. But, we've found it to be, pretty exciting and encouraging what we've been able to do in our nonprofit, in this side hustle, in just personal efficiency and things like that. And so,
and if you're a podcaster out there who's listening to this, or you're producing content and you're feeling swamped by all the non-enjoyable parts of that project, reach out to us. We'd love to help you. Email us, Slack us, whatever. And we'd be able to help you like create some automations. We're doing that at scale, and we're excited to work with new partners.